How do you feel now that you know?
Do you feel
regret?
Welcome back. I'm your boy Bear Jags, and thanks for following along with my journey. In life, there's stories that make you think, stories that make you wonder, and then there's stories like this, stories that tear at the very fabric of what we believe we know. In this electrifying interview, recently on the Shawn Ryan Show, we're going to listen into Chris Bledsoe's astounding story, mind-bending, life-altering situation. Is this a gift, a blessing, a curse, or something far more gripping? Let's listen into Chris's bone-chilling interview. Prepare to have your mind altered. Let's get into this.
To me, the real world is the unseen world, where there's no time. I think we're in some sort of matrix here where we experience time from the physical body, right? And once you're born, it starts decaying right after it grows, and it's a cycle. But the eternal world is alive and around us, and I have been able to experience that, and have shared it with a lot of others. This hidden world around us. I think our loved ones are on the other side, cheering for us to get through to the other side. I'm stronger in my faith than I ever have been. But 10, I was shot point blank with a shotgun. It was New Year's Day, 1972. After hunting season, season had gone out on the 31st, and so it was fix the roads on Saturday and cook a hog. So we got all these men, this part of the club, were out repairing the roads and all the farm, right? And my grandfather and the farmer that owned the land was at the club tending to the hog on the cooker. So myself at 10 and my best friend and my first cousin grabbed a shotgun, took off about a mile away, 3/4 of a mile. We walked to the back of a cornfield and we spread out and we were going to shoot doves, right? It was dove season. Ran up right behind me, and when I reached over and picked that shell up, he was going to shoot over me. He'd shoot that bird plane. Kids, when I stood up, it hit me right square right here in the shoulder, blew a hole this big. I have a scar that big on my back. Now imagine a 10-year-old. I was only this tall. It felt like a sledgehammer hit me. It drove me about 10 feet forward and face down in the forest. And the first thing, I felt blood running everywhere. And I said, why did you shoot me? And now my cousin's coming across the field and they're fighting. They're screaming at one another, go get help. He's my cousin, I'm staying with him. He's my best friend, I'm gonna stay. That's what they were doing. I'm laying there bleeding to death. And so the farmer heard them fighting, and here he comes down that cornfield in an old pickup truck. It was blue and white Ford from the 60s. And he runs in the woods, picks me up like a sack of potatoes and threw me in his truck. Took me to the hospital. Next thing I know, I'm up in space looking down from way up high. I could see the earth getting smaller and smaller and smaller. All I remember is seeing earth from above and being out of my body in total peace. I wasn't cold, I wasn't afraid, I was just at a marvel of looking at all this. And then when I came back to, there's my mom looking through the window crying. Along about 2004, my Crohn's was so bad. I mean, it was in bad shape, and I was in such depression because I had lost $19 million in savings and net worth, gone. I've sold every apartment building or house I had, rentals. Leading up to that incident, I'd had this near-death experience in the hospital from being over-medicated from the medicine they were giving me. They weren't checking my vitals and my liver like they were supposed to, and I went into this toxic poisoning and unconscious. And so now I've sold my business because of all what the crash, and here I am sick, really bad sick. So I'm recovering from this disaster in 2005. So we fast forward to 2006, and about October of 2006, I had gotten better enough that my dad convinced me to get out and try to work. And remember, I'd lost everything. We were living in an 8,000 square foot home on a golf course with a pool out back. 20 years we were doing great, and now I'm living in a mobile home, and I'm having to apply for free lunch for my kids.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And my doctor is treating me. He's like, he would just hug me and cry with me. So we'd been friends forever. And he said, I'm sorry for getting emotional here. Thinking back is hard. Today it's wonderful and joyful. It's a different world today, but those old memories are tough. But he said, look, there's a new study out. There's this antidepressant medicine called Paxil that's supposed to show help for Crohn's, because stomach problems are exacerbated from stress. The more you worry, the worse it gets. And I was so bad that my whole inside was inflamed and was very painful. And so he puts me on Paxil. And he tells me I should probably have somebody to talk to. So he sends me to a psychiatrist, right? Never thought about anything like that. And I was embarrassed to go, but he convinced me you need to do this. So I go to this psychiatrist, and I thought it was odd when I walked into his room. He was smoking a cigarette and laughing and talking to me. And he only spent 5 minutes with me. He looks at my paperwork and what the doctor prescribed, and he said, oh, you're on all the wrong stuff. He didn't take me off that. He added more to it. He just added a couple prescriptions that said, take this and come back in 5 days. And within 60 days, I didn't know who I was. And I had gone into, I was unconscious. And what he did, he had put me on something called lithium. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know even what the scribble was. He didn't tell me that's what it was. He just wrote these prescriptions. And the thing, when you take that, you're supposed to test your liver for metals, and all your system, your organs can fail because of toxic metal poisoning. Well, that's what happened to me. I woke up in the hospital. I was laying on a stretcher, completely covered from head to toe. And I come up out of my body, and I was at the ceiling, and I could see down my wife sitting there. 3 doctors walked in the room, and she was crying. And I never forget, I heard the doctor's name, which I won't say it now because of his privacy, but the guy said, good evening, doctor. This is the 113th patient that this physician has injured or put in the hospital. Come to find out, the guy that was treating me had gone off the deep end and was taking medication himself. I don't know what he was taking, but he overdosed and died while I was in the hospital. He put 113 patients of his in the hospital and overdosed and died. You know, why? It's like getting shot. I didn't want that. I didn't ask for it. It just happened. And now here it is, somebody else is poisoned me. Or it was always, it just seems like everything that's happened to me has been out of my hands. I mean, there's a lot in this book that I've been through, from 3rd-degree burns, catching on fire when I was 2 years old. I had big scars up my legs, to a brand new Trans Am in '79 blew up 2,000 miles in the radiator. It overheated and the radiator exploded and put me in the hospital with 3rd-degree burns from my neck out to this arm. I had skin grafts. a brand new car. So I thought all my life, something's trying to keep me from being here or keep me from doing something one day.
So the near-death experience was you witnessing the conversation between the doctor and your wife?
Yes. That's all I remember. It was...
and then you're back in your body?
I'm back in my body and miserable now, recovering. And yeah, it all relates to it. In fact, I believe that when I was 10 years old, when that happened to me, it was so traumatic. I grew up with a gun in my hand, 5 years old. It's just part of being where I was raised. 10 years old, I'm carrying a gun and got shot. So my whole life changed to a different perspective. And I didn't realize it until this event happened in 2007.
Wow. Talk about a bone-chilling experience. What Chris is going through here is unimaginable. I couldn't even imagine. The man's been sick, he's been shot, and now he's poisoned. Unbelievable. I couldn't imagine the feeling of that emotion of being shot, the fear. Have you ever been shot, or anybody you know have been shot? Let us know in the comments below what those emotions must feel like. Unbelievable. This story is starting to unfold as something you'd have to hear to believe. Let's listen in and hear what Chris has to say.
So, I looked after a house for Dad for about 4 months, late 2006, and it was finished up just before Christmas, but we had a punch list to do, so we all came back, and then right after the 1st, January the 1st, the crew went back down to the coast to do the punch list. They called me. We had finished. We got it all signed off, and we got your check. So I said, well, bring it on to the house and give it to Dad, and he'll pay you. 12:30 or 1 o'clock, they went to town, cashed them, and come back and called me and said, hey, boss, let's celebrate. Would you take us fishing? And I knew what that meant because these guys were just construction workers. They worked with my dad for years and years, but when they wanted to go fishing, that meant I had the only four-wheel drive truck, and where they wanted to go, we had to go down in the woods to a river bottom, right? And this is gnarly going down in there. We loaded up the fishing gear and took off to the river, only 3 miles away. Cape Fear River, it's not a big river, it's only like 60 yards wide where we were. And the main road, if you come up on a big field on the left, there's a two-rut road that crosses this field. It's 200 yards across to the wood line. When you get to the wood line, there's a gate, and it goes downhill 100 feet to the river, about 1/8 of a mile. And then you make a right, and you end up in a cul-de-sac, another 1/8 of a mile. It's important I tell you this so you get what happened. So we're now sitting on the river bank, parked, about 2:30 or 2:45. And I wasn't into fishing. My mind wasn't into fishing at all. In fact, I was struggling with everything. My thoughts, I'm broke. How can I support my children? I'm 46 years old. I have this disease that's killing me. This Crohn's disease is a terrible thing. And so once they started fishing, I said, I'm going to walk down in the cul-de-sac to it's about an acre of grassy area, just a round acre is where that road dead end. And then the very back of it is where I had walked down in along the river to a gully, and I sat beside a tree till about 4 o'clock. Here's the weird thing. I was just part of the way down paralleling the river when I heard something in the woods beside me. I thought it was a deer to start with. And so I stopped, and I'm trying to look through this thick brush, and couldn't see anything. So I walked some more, and when I started walking, it started walking. It scared me then. I don't never get scared in the woods. I mean, I'm in the Boone and Crockett record book for shooting one of the biggest black bears in North America. I got afraid. This sound started sounding like 2 feet. And so I stopped and I got down on my knees and I looked under the brush, because along the edges it's really thick. Once you get in the woods, it'll open up, right, because of the tree canopy. Never could see what that was. 3 times it had me to stop and to get down to see what was that tracking me. So when I got to the curve, or to the point where the road turned west and started up the hill, the sound stopped. And I'm looking up at a sky that I thought the sun was still about the top of the trees or so on, but I couldn't tell because I'm looking uphill at a metal gate, cattle gate, at the top of that hill. And it's a long haul up there, about 100 feet to go up. And it's ruts, muddy ruts and grass, some places knee-high, so I'm having to watch every step. And it's starting to get dark. And the closer I got to the top of that hill, I'm not hearing this in the woods beside me now. And I wanted to tell you that because it'll come back in the picture here in a second. I got about 30 feet from the top of that hill, and I began to see what I thought was the sun, the top of it, just the very top of it. And I walked
over the horizon?
Yeah, over just, I got a gate. I'm looking up at a gate, a metal gate. The road goes up. And I could see the sun just barely above that gate and the top of the trees. So when I first glanced at it, I didn't think much about it. I looked down to take another step because I didn't want to walk in the mud. And about 3 more steps up the hill, there it was in full view. And it was this blood red, tangerine orange ball of fire, about 40 or 50 feet around. And I was like, oh my God, what is that? I could see the flames going around it and the tips were shooting off. This thing's huge, like big, and it's only 300 yards away. It's just beyond the road and just at the top of the trees and sitting there. And it kind of frightened me a second, but I'm curious. I walked up 2 more steps, and when I did, now my field of view's gotten wider because I don't have the trees of the road. I'm looking up the chute now, I can see more. And there's a second one right beside it. And that's when chills came over me. So I couldn't explain it. I dropped to my knees because by doing that, I'm using the hill to hide from them. So I'd raised my head up and I could see they were there. And I'm sitting here on the ground thinking, what in the world is this? I knew it wasn't nothing from this world. I automatically knew what I'm looking at wasn't a helicopter, it wasn't something of ours. So I'm hiding there, and I crawl over to the ditch into these reeds. Reeds are growing wetlands, and so I'm peeking through these reeds, thinking I'm hiding from what I'm seeing, not realizing they'd see me. And I start making my decision to run. I gotta run, because I'm thinking about Chris Jr. back behind me down the hill. I've gotten frightened. I sit there long enough that it really frightened me bad. So I made a plan to run, and I turned my body. I'm sitting on the ground on my knees hiding, right? So I raise up, and I turn my body to run. I'm in the motion to run. And I look back one more time. I gotta see what's up there. And when I did, straight above me, a third one appeared and shot right down beside the other 2. And I knew it saw me. I knew I was on its radar. And that's a different feeling. Somebody can see a ball of light fly by. Oh my God, I saw a UFO. And that does something to you. But when you see it and it responds to you, and the way that did.
Wow. Breathtaking. I can't even believe what I just heard. This is becoming such a compelling story. I just cannot wait to hear more. I could not imagine walking up and seeing something like this. I would be questioning everything. What would you do? Would you walk up to it? Would you run? Tell us in the comments below. We'd like to know. All of us. I'm starting to feel like Chris is dealing with like an opportunity a little bit here. I'm not completely sure. I don't know what I'd do in this situation here. This is completely jaw-dropping and earth-shaking. Let's continue to hear what Chris has to say.
The next thing I know, I'm about 50 yards from the fire, and I'm kind of walking through this mud, and I have no recollection of what happened coming down that hill. I only could remember the last 50 yards of it going up to the fire. These three men are standing there around the fire. They're no longer fishing. Fire's burned down to this little small fire. And they're looking down, talking. They couldn't see me coming because I didn't have a flashlight. I'm coming out of the dark, but I could see them from the fire. And I snuck up on them, and I said, "Hey, guys, you won't believe what just happened." And the first thing, one said, "Where in the," and I'm not going to use the words they use, but "Where have you been?" I said, "I was just up at the hill." "What do you mean?" "I told you I was going up to the field." They said, "You've been going all night." I said, "No, I haven't. I've been going 20 minutes. And we're arguing this, and I noticed Chris Jr.'s not there. And I told him, "You won't believe what I just saw up the top of that hill, these 3 balls of fire." Then immediately, "Where's Chris Jr.?" "Well, he went looking for you 2 hours ago, and we can't find him now. He walked into the cul-de-sac, and to the far end of the cul-de-sac where you had gone earlier that day, searching for you." And I panicked. Oh my God, these woods are huge. 60 miles to Wilmington from where we are, and nothing but forest along that river. And all I could think is he's lost in there. 17 years old, no flashlight. And they're telling me that one stayed at the fire while the other 2 took my truck. And they even pointed out my truck had been moved from where I parked it. They said, "We've been everywhere looking for you all night." And so I immediately took off running to the back of that cul-de-sac, shouting for Junior. So I was worried about what happened to me up there. I was freaked, right? And here's my son missing. And I started making my way into the woods. And around the edges of any field, especially where we live, it's real thick because it's just shrubbery, right? Same. And so I'm parting this stuff, and I'm calling out for Chris Jr., and I get about 10 feet in there, and I hear him. He wasn't answering me until I walked right up, almost stepped on him. And he come up out of these bushes, and he grabbed me, and he's weeping. It's traumatic. These creatures, Dad, these creatures, "Why did you leave me? Why did you leave me?" I said, "I didn't leave you, son. I've been gone for 20 minutes. He's, "No, Daddy, you've been gone all night." He's just a baby. They're babies at that age. And so he began to tell me. I grabbed him. All he wanted to do was go home. He wanted to go home. He didn't want no more what happened to him. And so what happened was where he was, at the back of that cul-de-sac, he could see all the way down parallel the river to the end where I made the turn and started up the hill. So it's a 1/4 mile he could see all the way down. And he's over there in the edge of the forest calling out for me while they're driving the truck. One guy's sitting in the fire, and the fire is between, he's got to walk toward what he saw coming to get to the fire. So he sees these 2 red lights cross the road, and he thought they were flashlights, like military. I used to have a military flashlight that had a red on it, right? And you remember those. And so that was his first thought. There were somebody's walking with these red flashlights. So they crossed the road over to the riverside, disappeared. So he takes off and he runs back to the fire, and he tells these guys about these 2 lights he saw. And then he turns and he goes back to the back of that cul-de-sac, still calling for me. And About that time, these two red lights come back out of the riverside, back out in the road, and they start towards him. Now, these two balls of light, they look like this big, and they're floating 3 feet off the ground, coming all the way down that road. And as they got closer to him, he got scared, and he started hiding. So he lay down on his stomach and crawled backed up under the thickest shrubs. And they came up within 20 feet of him. And what he saw were these two little glowing beings that were yay high, probably 2.5, 3 feet tall, and they had these bright red eyes. And the whole time one was staring at him. He couldn't shout, he couldn't move. He was in such terror, he was frozen. And I don't know if they had the power to keep him from, he thought that they had that power over him. As long as they were looking at him, he couldn't speak. So he was gone a total of 2 hours. And I don't know how long exactly he was there with these little beings walking around him, but it put him in shock. And so I led him back to the fire. And these guys were freaked out too, because they'd heard what happened. They didn't know what happened. They knew that I'd been gone all night, and Junior's talking about creatures, and I'm talking about balls of fire at the top of the hill. So these men starting to get spooked real bad. And one of the guys looks up and points, "Oh, look at that." And when we all look up, and it looked like the brightest star, Venus, in the night sky, when it's just its brightest. It was 8 or 9 of these just appeared, and they just came on. And they went out away from one another, and they came back in a circle, and they made this big circle, and they were putting on a show. And then 3 of these things came all the way down and landed across the river. 60 yards to the other side of that river, they were up on the other side of it in a cut down. It timbered the place out. So you can imagine pandemonium set in at that moment.
Okay, this story is really starting to bend my perception on reality. It really is. This is better than a movie. This is insane. Chris Bledsoe is telling us one of the most compelling stories I have heard in a long time. Personally, I don't know how you feel. We'd probably like to know. Tell us below. I can barely wrap my head around it. I could not imagine being one of his buddies down by the river after searching for him for hours and having him walk up and be like, "What are you talking about? I've been right over there." And then finding out that my son was missing. Any one of us would lose our minds at this point. We would be questioning everything. I swear, all I'd be thinking, it's time to leave. Let me find my boy and let's get out of here. What else would you do? This is such a good story. Chris Bledsoe is opening us up to what I feel is another example of faith. This story has got me on the edge of my seat. Let's continue to listen in and hear what Chris has to say.
We left out of there with fishing poles still there, coolers, everything we brought. We didn't even wait to touch it. And we jumped in that truck, and I'm taking off up through this muddy road, and one of the guys is beating on the back of my seat, saying, "Go, go, go," and there's this red ball of light coming up behind us, following the truck. So undoubtedly it came out of the back of that cul-de-sac, was still in there, and was coming up behind the truck. They were screaming to the top of their lungs. So we make the turn, and we start up that hill, and I'm going so hard with that Ford truck up that hill, and it's wallowing in the ruts, and the shrubs on either side of brushing the mirrors. I was down in the swamp. And when I crossed the top of that hill, that gate, it was almost like, I liken it to an old streets of San Francisco maybe, where the cars would jump when they go over the hills. We almost went airborne. That's how fast we were trying to depart that place. But when we topped that hill, those 3 orange orbs, 2 of them were still in the exact same spot.
Are you serious?
Yeah. Now we got 3 40-foot balls of white light on the riverbank behind us, and something, an orb, which I know what it was one of those beings. Their eyes from a distance looked like a little ball of light. You can't really tell. And so now we're faced with 2 40-foot balls of fire, 300 yards and about 200 feet in the air in front. And the third one is the one that took me. And that thing now is sitting in the road. And it's halfway between us and the highway. So it's 100, 150 yards away. And when I went over that hill, I slammed on brakes because of that. It's sitting there, it looks like a football now. It's going white. It changed from red to white. And it's sitting sideways in the road. It's hovering about 5 feet off the ground, and it looks like an egg or a football. About that time, we heard gunshots, and we all heard them, and we thought immediately one of these country boys had pulled out the shotgun and they're shooting at this thing. So it just pivots, and it starts towards us. It's coming down the road at us, 5 feet off the ground. Then it starts up. Before we heard the gunshots, there's this mobile home in the back of that field, and there were 2 cars there. And one of the guys with me says, "I know who that is. That's Shane. I play softball with him. So let's go to his house." Nobody had a phone. I didn't have a cell phone. I couldn't afford one. Nobody had one. And we just wanted somebody to see this with us, right? So I drove across the ditch, up in this man's yard, pulled my truck right up to his front door. And the storm door's open. I mean, it's closed, but the front door's open. So we could see the TV playing through the door, 2 cars in the yard. And one of the guys gets out, knocks on the door. Nobody answers. And I even blew the horn. My truck's, 6 feet from the front door, headlights blaring in. And I'm looking back through the window, and this thing's sitting in the road behind us, right? Because the mobile home was facing the way out. And we had turned up to the door, and that Orbs, this football was still there, 100, 150 yards. Nobody answers. So I back out, and I pull back out in the road. Now I'm about 40 or 50 yards closer to this thing because we had to go forward to get to this mobile home. About that time, the 3 gunshots happen. And then it starts, and it comes, and it comes. And when it gets to my truck, I open the sunroof on it, and it crossed over the top of my truck, and it was probably 60 feet up. I could have shot it with a homemade slingshot. And it hit this thing. No sound, just glowing white light that was doing this.
Did it look solid, or did it look kind of translucent?
It looked, once it got that close to us, it looked almost, it was blinding from the light. But at a distance, it looked like an egg. It's hard to tell it was translucent because of the light coming off of the thing. But it was definitely shifted from a red ball of fire to a football or an egg.
Oh my gosh, listen to this. Just recently, whistleblower Jacob Barber claimed he recovered an egg-shaped craft. And here's Chris Bledsoe saying he saw an egg-shaped craft. Do these men know things that we do not? Obviously, I'm believing they do. This is out of control. As we further get into this interview, we're going to realize that the government is fully aware of everything that is going on. I feel like these guys are running for their lives. In my opinion, if I was in that situation, I think I would have said, "We're running for our lives, thinking the world is over. What is going on? Get me to my family. Let me tell people I love them. Please get me out of here." This story is just getting better and better by the moment. And not only is it getting better, but I feel like I'm almost learning something here. I feel like I'm having some sort of like an awakening a little bit, reaching deeper into my own psyche and making me ask questions that I didn't even know I would ask myself. Let's keep listening in and hear what Chris has to say. Keep it rolling.
Here this thing comes over my truck. Right when it got above.
Was it passing through things, or was it moving around things?
It moved up and over a tree in front of me. There was a
Okay, so
tree.
it wasn't like it was passing through trees or trucks or
although they do
any.
They do
So
that.
it was doing both.
No, this one, it came down the road, and there was one tree between us and it. To the side, it went up and over it. And when it came over the truck, it cleared the trees behind me. There's a solid stand of woods behind me. So it had to have been about 80 feet at the most to clear them trees. And then it turned it pivoted and shot off to the north. So I hit the gas. And now I'm flying out of there, and these guys, they're just the end of the world. We've been invaded. Where's the military? Where's Fort Bragg? Get me home so I can see my wife before it's over. I mean, it was just drastic. They were all terrified. I wanted to get out of the truck and look at it. You know, they were like having nothing to do with that. So we take off and we start toward dropping these guys off. They were fighting who got to go home first so bad that this guy that lived 7 miles away went out. So we had to drive to him, drop him off, and turn around and come back to drop the other two off, right? But on the way, we had Orbs, balls of light, tracking us alongside the truck, crossing over in front of us. I slammed on brakes. I saw it immediately where it was, and I wanted to get out and look at it up under it. I mean, it was right above us. It was just above this big high-tension power line. Well, they were fighting me bad. They're not having none of this. And at that moment, it spoke to me, telepathically or whatever, and said, you need to not worry about her. She's in good hands. And so I take these guys on home, right? I never told them what happened. I only wrote about it years later. But that's when I got peace from the whole incident after 25, 30 years, or 20 years at least. Everybody's terrorized by UFOs, orbs, lights. And I'm thinking about this relief from what. So I'm in a different world from them now, right? And I still don't know what happened to me. I had no clue what happened for 4 hours. Couldn't believe it.
I still can't get over what those men must have been thinking about, especially with the emotion when those orbs were chasing them. They must have thought it was over. God, that must have been scary. What do you think? Tell me in the comments below. Gosh. And another thing that really has me on the fence, I can't even comprehend the feeling of what these people must have been like, how much fear must have been going through them when they got home, and all of a sudden, their whole property is being lit up with action. I mean, they are in a state of mind right now, from what I'm feeling, that would be impossible to even try to relate to. Chris Bledsoe is encountering something that's so far beyond the average person's concepts of reality. It may be a blessing. I don't know. It may be a gift. I'm starting to feel like Chris may be chosen. Let's listen in, hear what he has to say, and keep it going.
So I dropped these guys off. Chris Jr. and I head back home. Now I'm worried about him. He's panicked. He's going through the house, locking it down. Every room, he'd close the door and lock it, even the bathroom. And he'd turn the lights on the room. Run up, shut the blind, turn all the lights and lock the door. I'm in my study looking on TV to try to find news. You know, there's an invasion happening. We just knew this. And it was crickets. I couldn't find anything. So Junior finally comes to the room and says, have you found anything? I said, no, son. And then about that time, we hear something come over the house with this humming noise. I thought it was a helicopter because it was coming from Bragg's direction, which is only, 15 miles from me, from the base, 20 miles. And it's heading exactly towards the river. And suddenly, once it goes out of hearing, every dog in our kennel started barking. Now, my dad raised dogs all his life. He had 100 at the time when I'm growing up, and even then he had 15 hounds in that kennel. And these old hounds got a loud mouth, right, and they're barking as loud as they can. And what it sounded like was they were afraid. Dogs can bark different sounds, and anybody knows hunting knows what a dog's saying. I knew they were scared. They were seeing something. They didn't know what it was. I thought somebody had come from the road and was breaking into his shop, and the dog saw. And that was what was going on in my head. And Jenner was like, we're not going out there. I said, we'll use a flash. We won't use a flashlight. We'll sneak down in there and we'll use Rosie. I had a 110-pound Chesapeake Bay retriever sitting on the back steps, and her hair was standing up. She's watching towards the kennel in the woods. And this awful racket, right? And I finally convinced him to go with me or stay, whichever he wanted. And he was scared to be by himself. So he grabbed me by the back of the shirt, and I'm walking real slow. I walked out the door, and Rosie took off toward the kennel, ran out of sight. We walked across the lawn to a two-rut road, went down in the woods, got to the back of that kennel. And now all these dogs, and imagine they're very loud, and we're standing there looking at 15 hounds in a kennel, barking as hard as they can towards the woods in the back. Oh, this is weird. These dogs should be looking toward the garage. And I'm whispering to Jenner, and Rosie's right there in front of us, pointing in the woods, her hair standing up, barking every breath. I said, Jenner, I said, it must be a bear. Dogs, not scared of deer. But they will do this on a bear sometimes. There's a scent, they get scared. I said, I'm gonna put Rosie in on whatever's in there, and she'll run them out. We're gonna run back to the yard and go to the back of the property. We made a plan, and we're gonna hide behind this giant oak tree and hope we can cut her off before she runs through. So as soon as I bumped her on the butt, she jumped in the woods, and Jenner and I took off running. We had to go to the end of that road, make a left in the yard, and go to about 400 feet, 500 feet. There's a big yard, 6 acres there. So when I made the left turn, the grass was now we got frost, right? It was cold that night. We're talking about 11 o'clock now. He pulled her loose from me. So I thought I just pulled away from him when I slipped a little bit. But what happened was he had had enough. He took a right, went back to the house. He's in the back. I didn't know that, though. And I'm running to the back hard as I can. Ran up to this big tree, and I ran so hard, I was trying to be quiet, and I'm trying to catch my breath, so I'm panting, trying to be quiet with it, right? And I've stopped myself against the tree. And so I turned around after about a few seconds of stopping and panting. Dog's coming straight at me. He's coming through the forest. And I looked back to see if Chris Jenner was going to come up. And when I did, there was it's the same thing he described on the river, this little glowing being about yay tall with glowing red eyes. And it was glowing the color of the moon. It looked like a child. It looked like a 4-year-old child, about that size. Didn't look like a gray alien or none of that, what people report. It looked like a glowing little child. But the details, it's shiny. This thing was glassy. It was gleaming. The body looked like it had glass on it. And about that time, when I turned back and saw it, it frightened me so bad that my hair stood up. Every cell in my body went, oh my God, I'm dead. So I went toward the trees to turn around instead of where I was standing, because I didn't want to get no closer to it. So I leaned into the tree, and I turned and put my back to the tree, and I said, I surrender. I don't mean you harm. And it said to me in this thunderous voice, it said, you don't understand. I'm not here to hurt you. We're here to help you. About that time, Rosie comes on through, and this thing vanishes in front of me. I didn't see it anymore. I walked up to the house trying to figure out why it just happened and how not to tell Chris Jenner what I had just seen, because he didn't want that around him any longer. And next morning, when I get up, about 10 o'clock that day, I hadn't had my medication, and I'd been taking medication for 17 years for Crohn's. And if I missed it one day, it was suffer time. Yeah, I'd take it every day. If I missed a day, the next 3 days, my system would get out of whack, and it was more restroom, right? And I didn't feel the normal sickness that I normally have. I didn't feel the nausea. I didn't feel any of it. And I thought, this is weird. I've been living with this every day, and now I don't feel it. And from that point forward, I never had another symptoms of Crohn's disease. Long story short, that was the end of the January 7th initial encounter. Walking back to that house and trying to get my son settled down from the shock that he'd been through. And I told him, I said, son, I believe they're angels. He said, no, Daddy, they had to be, no, he couldn't even get it out. They were demonic entities. I said, no, they weren't, son, they were angels. They healed me. So we battled that for months. And here's the thing. It never left me. I mean, it never left. And to this day, it's still with me. And I mean, stronger today than it was back then. This is why the government has studied me. They've studied me more than any human in existence. From DIA, CIA, DOD, the Ministry of Defense in England, the CIA, Jim Semivan wrote the foreword to my book. He's the director of operations for the CIA.
Whoa. This is getting so deep. His Crohn's disease is gone, his symptoms. This is beginning to become more than just a story. It's evolving to a mystery. At this point, I think we're all starting to gather that Chris has encountered an angel. And this angel may have a higher purpose for him. Have any of you ever encountered an angel, an alien, or a being? We'd all like to know. Tell us in the comments below. Let's keep it going and hear what he has to say next.
This is where I want to say, if I could say this word, this is where hell set in for me. Because I'm telling everybody, they put it in my head that night that I had to tell the world. So I compared myself to Richard Dreyfuss on Close Encounters of the Third Kind, where he was making the mashed potato Devil's Tower on his table. He could see it. He was completely obsessed with this phenomenon. And I was as well. All I wanted to do was tell everybody. Well, that was the worst thing I did, because now the church comes down on me. You're playing with demons. That they tried to take my children from me. They wanted to divide my family. They were telling my kids that I'm playing with the devil. Mm-hmm. He's going to ruin them children. Somebody called social services on me. I had to deal with that, with the government, to try to just keep my kids, right? These things can read your mind. They're connected to our thoughts. This is why one thing I can promise you, if you're a God-fearing man and you know the Bible, one thing that the church knows is they always preach. You'll hear it all the time. Only God can read your thoughts. Only heaven, not that the devil can't read your thoughts, right? So this is something taught to all Christians from early on. The devil can whisper in your ear, but he can't read your mind. Well, they read your mind, and they know they're connected to us. They're connected to our thoughts. They know your heart, they know your intentions, and somehow or another, Shawn, they have the ability to stop the timeline, to manifest things, to make things happen. It wasn't a scary thing. It wasn't like it was there to harm anybody. It was there to get me through what had just happened. It was protecting me. And that eventually faded away after a few months, and I stopped seeing it. But it was always there, and it was very real to me. And it later showed up. It looked like a 4-year-old child.
A 4-year-old?
4-year-old. About like a 3-4-year-old, little toddler. Not much more than 3 feet tall. Glowing softly like the color of the moon, with these, and it red eyes, and it had a triangle shape underneath it. It was glowing, gleaming from head to toe. It had this triangle on its chest right here. And that turned out to be a pretty big symbol for some people in the government.
What is that symbol?
Well, there's one right here from NASA. That's a triangle on that pin. Wonder how I got that. They were the first ones to come wanting to know about that little being with the triangle on its chest.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Did it wear clothing?
It was gleaming so bright, it had something on, but it looked like the outer layer of it was just glossy, gleaming, brilliant. And there's a description that Daniel gave in chapter 10 in the Bible where he describes an angelic being, that his encounter, and he says that its body was gleaming like topaz, and it had torches, fire, red glowing eyes. This is Daniel's description straight out of the Bible. I thought it was a guardian angel.
Right away, you thought it was a guardian angel.
Yeah,
and the entire family said that it was demonic.
Not then. They didn't say anything. They just were listening and filming. This was in 2005.
So what do those films look like? Does that look like you interacting with thin air?
Well, yes, probably some of them, yeah, I'm sure. But it immediately followed me home, and these orbs would appear, a ball of light, flash, and out steps these shadowy figures, and they would walk through the house and walk through walls. It looked like a human, same size and all. I could see its eyes because they were red, right, and they were glowing, and this triangle shape. I actually drew it and painted it in 2009. But they did this little glowing little entities.
And these are the same type of eyes that you saw at the river?
Yes. It's what my son described. Now, the being that I was telling you about, when I come out of the hospital for a few months there, I kept seeing this little being. It didn't have red eyes. It looked like a person, a little small person. It was there. It'd tell me it was there to protect me. It was watching over me, and that I was going to be fine. It looked like a small person, but it didn't look.
Could you differentiate between a regular 3-year-old, 4-year-old child and this?
Yes, because it seemed to be grown or an adult, but small. It spoke like an adult. It interacted with me like an adult. But that didn't last long. This is after all this medication the doctor put me on. But they can appear in a group of 50 people standing beside me, and that one skeptical person will look that way for 1 second, and it'll appear in front of everybody else. Today, it's gotten to where, let's say at that time back then, after it happened, after the initial encounter and all my kids come home, and I'm being told not to talk about it because it was scary, and they had my wife believing it's demonic. And for a long time, which is understandable when you're raised in the church, they all say this is demonic. Well, They don't know. They have no clue. Nobody does. I'm telling you, not even the Pope. They don't know. Everybody imagines what's out there, speculates. But until you see it and you interact with it, you're speculating, you're questioning. And that's when it healed me. It said, we're not here to hurt you, we're here to help you. I didn't really speak other than I surrender. I'm sorry, I don't mean you any harm. And it's telling me this in my head. And I felt this greatest joy and this sense of relief that I understood now, no more fear. And that's why immediately when I reported it, I knew it was these same angelic beings, but it didn't look like this little being I'd seen 2 years prior. And they still tried to think this can't be true. It just can't be true. And that's what was making me so emotional about Chris Jr. He struggled so hard. And he comes home telling what he saw, and nobody wanted to believe him. They're just like, he's crazy like his dad. Right? Here I run a $18 million, $20 million a year company, and I went through a terrible time with sickness and a doctor, and I come out the other side and now I'm crazy, right? This guy's crazy. And so the whole community basically started mocking my family, and it turned into 5 years of what I call in the book 5 years of darkness, from 27 to 2012. And when that 2012 came, everything changed. And then within a few months or weeks, my wife would take the kids out to see her mom or go to church. I wasn't going to church anymore. I'm at home in my study in complete depression because nobody believed what happened. And now nobody's believing my son. Pushed us away from the church, that she would be in town coming home, and kids running the door. Oh my God, Dad, you won't believe what we saw on the way home. There was a big triangle thing in front of the car flying right down in front of us, following us home. So now my kids are coming home, and I just sat back and I'd smile. Thank you, Lord, because I was praying every day. Lord, let my family, let my children experience what I did, so at least they would believe me. And then when everybody started experiencing it with me and the family, now it's demonic. It's really happening to this guy, but he's bringing the devil into his house. This is where it ended up.
Unbelievable. The church has turned their back on him. I personally believe they should have supported him and tried to understand what he was going through. Let's be realistic. He's a father, a man of faith, a businessman who unfortunately was so sick, was down on his luck, and lost everything. Why would they want to ridicule him instead of calling him the demon whisperer? This is so bizarre. Why? From what I'm gathering here, the Bible does speak of persecution upon the ones with the word of wisdom. I don't know if this is what we're seeing, but I feel like we may be unfolding something far more deeper than we ever could have expected. I'm believing Chris has a message. Let's listen in and continue to have our minds blown.
In October, this was in January when it happened. 10 months later, October, I saw on the television a show called UFO Files. And there was this Stanton Friedman, a physicist on there, and he's talking about UFOs. I'd never seen any of those shows. And it come across, report your sighting to MUFON. So I quickly got their email address and I wrote them. A pretty big outfit, international, right? So that's to go to. If you have a sighting, you go to MUFON. I had never heard of them until I saw it on TV. So I made the report. And so I sent it 2 weeks later. It was the 13th of October. And immediately they wrote me back, oh, we want to talk to you. Well, I got scared. I said, nah, this is too real now. I don't want to lose my family. So I told them no. I just wanted to report it, but I don't want to interview. January comes along, they write me again. We're going to close the case, but we really want to talk to you. And by then, it's been a year now, I can't function. My head had some kind of block and I couldn't think at all. And so I said, okay. And in February, they sent a local investigator from Raleigh, North Carolina, and he came in there. And that's when my wife said, you ever heard of, what do you know about shadow beings? Now, we'd never talked about the UFO thing, but she'd been seeing these in the house and got shoved a couple of times just to get her attention. I was praying every day, Lord, let her see it. And then she looked at me and said, don't ever pray for me like that again. But it was in the house, it was interacting with the kids, Orbs, over the house, outside. And immediately they saw me on doing a show on Discovery Channel. You got to do it, we'll vindicate you. You do this show, everybody will believe you. So I agreed to it. I had to beg Junior to participate. Well, they did their show, and immediately they set me up. They would come into my house to do an interview and call me, can you come to the hotel and sign all the paperwork? And then we're going to go from there. Well, when I got in that hotel, they had a guy from the FBI there with a lie detector thing set up and cameras pointing at it completely. I did 34 questions for 2 hours. They just over and over and over. And then on the show, they called me. They said he was lying about seeing an entity. Now things got really bad, the whole community. And now the school, my children's school, they're being made fun of. Their dad's crazy. They're laughing at my kids. It nearly ruined my boys. They were all, thinking girls, dating. Now everybody's laughing at them in the hallways, calling them out in the school class and making them tell the stories. And now they're being told by the church, your dad is dealing with demons. Well, and they didn't want to believe it because they were seeing it with me. So it was a horrible place to be when the whole community come down on us there. And it continued for 5 years. But what happened was the community didn't let up. The church didn't let up. And I don't mean just my wife's side, but all the churches around, even the original ones, the people were talking. And the boys that were with me, their children were catching a fit. So 5 years goes by of pure nightmare. But NASA shows up. A friend from NASA, Dr. Hal Povenmire, my son Ryan, calls me, Dad, there's somebody here from NASA. He wants to talk to you. I said, well, tell him to stick around. I'll be home about an hour. 6'5", huge man. We were afraid of the government so bad because MUFON and the UFO world said the Men in Black was on TV then. They'll kill you. The government will kill you. Don't ever talk to different ones, the names they would use. And so now we're terrified. The government's knocking on our door. And they studied me. And long about 2012, 13, another guy comes from.
What was the initial guy's name?
Dr. Hal Povenmire. He was at NASA 59 years when he died.
What were they studying?
First off, he wanted to know about that little glowing being with the triangle on his chest. And when he first came, his mission, he told us, my mission was to debunk you. So he came and initially met us. Then he left on his own, and we didn't know where. He went back home, but he didn't. He was searching records from the sheriff's department to the FAA to knocking on every door in that community out there asking, did you see something? And he found out that 8 other people that night all witnessed it fly over their houses and stuff. One guy was 70 years old sitting on his front porch and it went 20 feet over his house. And so Hal knew then that this was real. And he became like a father figure. He would come and entertain my kids more than he would me because he's just that kind of guy. All throughout the 5 years after an event happened, Hal was the one there. There were other military people calling from the Air Force, sending letters, wanting me to interview, wanting me to draw pictures and all this stuff, and I would just stay away from it. I was still scared of Hal. I didn't know who this guy was yet. It was just 5 years into it. But my kids loved him.
Wow. If MUFON's gonna call you back and wants to do a story on you, that means something may be real. They do not hunt down myths in storybooks. This man has a power. I'm starting to feel like he has a gift from a higher entity or another alternate dimension that we do not comprehend. This has to be drawn from deep faith, lifelong faith, deeper than the average person has. He must relate all of his faith constantly to his day-to-day activities. I personally do not do this. Maybe this is why I'm not chosen. What do you think? Tell us in the comments below. We're all so curious. This story just keeps getting better. Keep it going, Chris. We can't wait to hear what's next.
In 2012, at Easter of 2012, this is when everything changed. This is really what got the U.S. government knocking on my door. This is why I'm here today. 2012, Saturday night, Easter. Sunday morning's Easter, right? At 3 o'clock in the morning, so it's actually Easter Sunday morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm asleep in the bed, dead asleep. That night before, I had all I could stand, seeing my kids coming home crying and the whole community making fun of the family and my dad. And now they've been experiencing this stuff. They know it's happening. So I walked outside that night. And I remember I had this desire to tell it to everybody. I had to tell it. It's like the Richard Dreyfuss Close Encounters thing. So I walked outside that night at 9:30 and I looked up to the sky and I said, thank you for ruining my life. I said, thank you for healing me and proving to my family that you're real, but this life is worse off now for my whole family. I'm better physically, but now my family is in shambles, all because of me. And I shouted it to the heavens. And I see these things, they're coming, these orbs are always around. And I knew it heard me. I knew it was, so I went to bed. 3 o'clock in the morning, I hear the same voice, the same little being that spoke to me and said, I'm here to help you, not hurt you. I heard that same voice, and it sounded like a man, really deep. And it said, arise. That's all I heard, that quick word, arise. And it was so deep, it was like thunder in my room. I jumped up from laying in the bed, dead asleep, to sitting up in my bed, and it's dark, I can't see. And there was 3 o'clock on. Back then we had a clock, alarm clock, and it said 3 a.m. Next thing I know, I see movement in the room. Whatever they did to me, they caused me to get dressed and follow out the door. Now I'm outside and I'm walking towards my dog kennel at 3 o'clock in the morning, fully dressed, clothes from being asleep. And suddenly this figure hands me something. As far out as this sounds, now I'm telling you, it sounds crazy. It took me 2 weeks to tell it because they all labeled me crazy and I stopped talking about it. Now 5 years later, this happens. And what happened was it handed me this object and it felt like a living creature, like a squirrel maybe or something that size, but I couldn't see or feel legs or a head. It felt just like a tube, but furry and kind of prickly. And handed it to me and said, you must keep this. Immediately I dropped it because I knew what it was and it was prickly. And its words came again, no, you must pick this up, you must keep this. So I reached down to pick it up. When I did, this being that was standing there is now gone. And I'm at the dog kennel, so I'm juggling it in my hand. I know I need to see what this thing is. It's dark, so I opened the kennel and put it in and closed the door. And the very second I did that, this blast of air come directed. It wasn't in the woods and around us. It was right straight in front of me. A blast of air hits me and blew me over. The wind. Later on, I understood the Holy Spirit. The word spirit means the wind. The Holy Spirit means the breath of God. So I had to put this in there. But it was the wind. A physical force blew me over. And as I hit backwards on the ground, I saw what appeared to be a translucent cow, a bull, run over me. And I could see stars inside of it, up through it. Well, what they handed me, I put in the kennel. Mm-hmm. When I locked the door or closed the door, now a blast of air next to the woods hits me, and out of that wind, when the wind hit me and blew me over, with that wind was a translucent cow or bull, a big one went over me, and it didn't hurt me, but I could see it clearly. I could see the stars inside. This is really strange because the guy that studies Egypt, Dr. Robert Grant, he discovered that bull inside the king's chamber. There's never been an inscription in that pyramid nowhere. So he goes in with LiDAR, and there's that bull, celestial bull, with stars inside of it. Robert Grant is who I was with last at Contact in the Desert a couple months back, and Robert was showing the Oculus to me about what he had discovered in the pyramid. So he put these goggles on, and he does this LiDAR, and their biggest daylight is a bull on the side of the wall in the king's chamber. You only can see it with this technology he has, and the stars are inside. And above it is a helix of DNA. And then on the sarcophagus in the king's chamber is the Alpha and Omega symbol.
What do you think that represents?
Well, Alpha and Omega it's God, the beginning and the end. The bull is the celestial bull. To me, the lady that came to me is the Holy Spirit, the breath of God, the wind, the Virgin Mary, Hathor, Demeter, Diana, her body. In every culture, on every continent, they all have a mother figure, all of them. But now listen, when the bull went over, I land on my back and I'm getting up the run. So I roll over, now I'm looking this way. And behind me, there's no cow anymore, there's a woman there. She's about 3 feet off the ground. She's glowing just the color of the moon. There's a circle of light on the ground. And she looks at me and she says, "You know why I'm here." And I knew I was crushed, basically, because I'd had this overwhelming desire to tell the world what I'd seen. And then that night I cursed at the heavens and said, "I'm never doing that. I'll never speak again." And now she's like, "You know why I'm here. This is your burden you must bear." She said that. She said, "If you'll tell this story, I'll always be with you. I'll allow you to share our presence with others and film us. So help me." I never had a picture of anything for the previous 5 years, only inside the house. When people see this or out in my children. Now everybody's coming to the house and it appears overhead. It appears around us. And it's greater today than it was then. And magic started happening. And when that word got out, then comes the government. They want to know about this lady.
Let's pause right there. I have questions.
Okay.
So the initial, what was it that you were handed?
I've been asked that a million times. I don't know. It was like a living creature.
It was living. It was moving around.
But it had no head or legs. It felt like if you had a squirrel in your hand or a hedgehog, that prickly, it felt like it was living, but it had no head or tail. And I asked the lady what this was, and she told me it was symbolic of humanity. It had lost its direction. Had no head or no tail. It completely lost its direction. And it vanished. It was a shadowy being, like a shadow being. So when you see these, you see this shadow of a human figure, but you can't really see the details. It's like a shadow. It's like a ghost, you might say. And I have pictures of these little beings, and they look like ghosts. I have a video of one of these beings coming out of an orb. Every year at Easter, either she comes back or something miraculous happens. Every year at Easter.
Every year since 2012?
Every year since then. Every year, including this year. And my son Ryan and his wife, and my grandson Teddy. Of course, my wife was a little bit scared, so she turned her head and ran in the house. But We all got to experience it this year at Easter. And exactly when I told them, at 8:30, it's going to appear. Here it comes, this big glowing bluish white ball of light through the forest, going in and out of the trees. It was approaching us, and my wife freaked out and ran in the house. But it's always something like that miraculous on Easter. And it just feeds more into my understanding of the phenomenon, the whole thing. She always comes in threes. Not always, but it's overwhelming. 3 is very meaningful in this. 3. And I filmed it over and over. 3 orbs, together. They'll line up like a triangle. They'll fly through the sky in a triangle. I said, well, if I didn't, I'll give you a video of that. I have multiple videos of that. It's always showing that symbol of 3. And she told me a lot of stuff that I never revealed, and to this day I haven't revealed a whole lot of it because I don't want to sound like a prophet or any of that. I just don't. My goal is to share this story with everyone and share the phenomena, which I have been able to do. And when it did, that night, a young lady with me was healed from cancer. Wow. This happened in 2015.
This is where he's starting to break down a little bit, but I can't blame him to say. I couldn't even comprehend this feeling of everyone turning against my family, my friends, thinking I'm a quack job, the church thinking that you're a liar and you're whispering to demons. It's almost sad what he's going through here. I can't blame him for wanting to come out and curse God almost. Not that I would, but then again, I have never been in this situation. So it's hard for me to say, what would you do? Would you just suck it up and walk it off? I don't know. These people, including myself, who are not complete and total God-fearing humans, not necessarily because we are not religious, because we just have not found faith. But stories like this, they awaken so many questions. They create a black hole of curiosity for me. And I'm starting to wonder, is it faith? Let's keep on listening to Chris and hear what he has to say.
Now what is it that caught the government's attention?
So one of the things it did is in October of 2013, I get a call from a professor in Wilmington about, he's a religious scholar, very famous. She's written several books, and you'd probably know her if I said her name, Dr. Diana Pasulka. She lived an hour and a half from me, and she was given 2,000 reports by MUFON to investigate why 2,000 people reported angels, angelic beings that year. They were seeing these. Now, you only ever hear about the bad stuff. You only ever hear about somebody being on a table with multiple instruments and all this stuff, abduction, the bad. But overwhelmingly, 95% of all of it, people come away with angelic, their experience is heavenly. That's one of the things that you will never hear about. October, I walk outside. I was a smoker then. I was watching TV with my wife. I paused the TV at 9:30. I said, I'm gonna go out and smoke. So I walked out on the back patio, and she comes out a few minutes later, and out in the back of our property, about 100 yards back in the dark, all of a sudden we see sparks come from the ground and go up in the air. And she said, what's up with that tree? I said, I don't know, but I see it. And suddenly it rained for 2 days. Ground was wet. This tree erupts into flames and goes shooting fire 13, 14 feet up in the air. Burnt the whole inside. It burnt from the inside out. Well, that got the attention of government. And, Hal was there. And now this other player from NASA wants to come see this tree. And he's codenames the Dragon. He runs all the launches for NASA. He is the head guy. He's National Reconnaissance Office. So that got me involved with the NRO. Next thing, I'm in Cape Canaveral, sitting with these guys, half a dozen of them. And that expands into a whole lot more. Now I'm dealing with 2 people from NASA. And this gets into medical study, stem cell research, and that happened a year later. And I'll tell you what got me there. Here's really what got the attention of the government. They heard about the tree. They all wanted to come see it, and they started. 2 weeks later, this journalist comes from Canada, calls me, I want to come see that burning tree. He'd heard about it. He pulls up, gets out with his camera. No clothes, no bags. He just gets out. He wants to go see this tree and film it before dark. He's out there at the tree. I'm with him. There's a Labrador, a dog. There's a Nellie, a full-grown female lab, laying there beside us. Everywhere I'd walk, she'd walk. We get back to the house. We stop just short of the door, and Nellie stops, and she's laying there, and Grant and I are talking, just glad to see one another. And I'm like, you want to stay the night? I get kids to get your bags. And they were all out there. There was 6 or 8 more people outside. He said, yeah, I'd love that. So he's between me and the back door. The house is open, the back door is open, the windows, it was in May. It was May the 11th or May the 5th. It was only 2 weeks after Easter. Nellie stands up and starts toward the door when Grant turns. And when she walks by him, I see blood come out of her neck. And it shot way out like a stream of blood. And it's like I freaked out. And Grant saw it. And she sprayed blood all over his pants when she went by. And she ran in the back door, bleeding all over the floor. And I ran and tackled her and took her outside and laid her on the concrete. And I was going through my head, oh my God, and Grant's filming this from above, and all my kids are gathered around, and she's got a hole inside of her neck, across her jugular vein that long, and I could stick my finger in it that deep, and blood just shooting out when her heart beat. And I had my hand on it, blood coming up through my fingers there. And I knew she was going to die. They were 30 minutes from a vet out in the country. Couldn't call an ambulance. I went through all this in my head. I thought, she's going to die. And everybody's freaked out. And I just looked up to the heavens. I said, Lord, help her. She went limp. And so I picked my hand up, and that hole was gone. Everybody saw it, disappeared perfectly. Like nothing had happened. She stood up, waggled her tail, and walked away. He filmed it all. And it didn't take long, that word got out. Next thing, I get a call from somebody connected to CIA. And he says, what are you doing this week? What are you doing tomorrow? We're going to have a party, for the family. He said, well, I need you in D.C. I said, D.C.? He said, yeah, there's a young boy up there that's really sick. And they've tried everything they can to help him. And he's got to make a wish. And his mom's a doctor. His grandpa's a cardiologist in New York. And they had spelled it as they were out of options. And so I agreed to go. He flew me up there, picked me up. I had no clue who I was meeting. I had no idea what I was doing. I had seen a dog miraculously get healed, and I didn't know what happened and how that happened. But these people thought at least we would try some UFO guy that healed a dog to help this child. So I was terrified. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to do. I was praying silently while I'm sitting here in front of this little boy. He's got a feeding tube, and they're telling us he's not going to live another year. And I'm with his mom and dad and him. And I prayed all night, Lord, help me. What do I do? So I stayed to 1 o'clock that morning. And this child had mitochondrial DNA disease, meaning he could never eat. If he ate food, he threw it up profusely. He couldn't make nutrients from the food, so he was dying. And once they get to the feeding tube, it's over. Usually they're dead right away. And I stayed to 1 o'clock in the morning, and it wasn't an audible voice. It was like this message came, this telepathic knowing. And it said, just hug him. So when I went to leave, I reached out and hugged him. I left at 1:30. His mom called me and said he's eaten 2 plates of food.
30 minutes later.
Yeah. His first name's Brandon.
Are you still in touch with him?
Yeah. Last Memorial Day, Jim from the CIA, the deputy director, called me. Brandon's now 21 or 2 years old, and he's going off to exchange school overseas, and he'd never been away from home, right? And they wanted me to be with him before he left. And they told me, we know you're good for him to be around him. But let me tell you another one. Now he's 13. When he turns 13, he's having a bar mitzvah. First time I've ever been in a Jewish celebration, right? And it was the most amazing thing. This child is giving a speech up in this big church in New York City on 48th and Madison. We're in the basement, and everybody that's anybody, from the deputy director to the director of operations to the CIA and all in between, were there. A whole lot of important, 200 people at least. My son Ryan, and they're out dancing on the floor, and he's, and I'm thinking back, all these people at home that's giving me such a hard time. If I could only tell them what I'm experiencing right now with my family. This is just a moment for me. Suddenly, panic happened. The music quit, and the crowd come off the dance floor. And I'm still sitting at my table with one other person. Everybody's going out dancing. Now, my wife is sitting at the table behind me. She had gotten up, and she's with Debbie, Jim's wife. Very powerful people. The crowd got around me so much they're standing over me, and I feel a person grab me on the shoulders and pulled me through the crowd and said, you got to help him, you got to help him. Well, at their table, this elderly man had passed out forward and was totally pale white. I mean, he was ghost white. All these people trying to revive him, trying to wake him up, couldn't do anything. She dragged me through the crowd to him and said, you got to save him. And I put a hand on each shoulder, and when I did, he went, and he stood up, sat up. And the whole room saw it. And so you can imagine what that did. And that was way back in 2014. And so that set me on a path that I had no clue I'd be going down. People, suddenly I've got hundreds saying, I'm sick, can you help me? And that's been the hardest thing for me, to try to help people, and because I never intended it to be that way. And I don't know that I can do anything. In fact, I don't do anything. It's something greater than I. And I think it's when I think of the divine world, it just comes. It's every day I can show you. Now I just pray for them, or if you know somebody that's sick, they might send me a photo now, and I just take the photo out and I hold it up to the heavens, and I ask the angels, God. I never pray to angels, I pray to God, and I ask for this help for this person. And
this is it. He's talking about how he met an angel. This angel has given him a consciousness of higher direction. It's only obvious. Symbolically speaking, he gets an animal with no direction. I wonder, is it due to the fact that we, ourselves in society, act like angels to an extent? Is it because of our wars, our savagery, our greed, our lack of consciousness, and our lack of compassion for our neighbors? Chris Bledsoe is teaching me personally a lesson today. from his story that will change me forever. Chris, keep telling us your life-changing story.
I've been private though, Shawn. I haven't shared this. In fact, I hate sharing this publicly because it's going to cause a whole lot more people to come, but it's still part of the story that tells the phenomenon with me, the experience with it. This is why I know it's from the divine world. It's not something with teeth and a ray gun coming here to get us. Mm-hmm. It's connected to our thoughts. It'll appear a lot when I ask it, and in front of me and you and others. Not every time, but pretty much all the time. Sometimes 50, 70 orbs will appear. Sometimes it's a little fire that'll appear right beside me like a candle. I've seen it. I'll look over and, oh my God, it's right there. And then it'll shoot off over my head. And a lot of people have seen this and have witnessed this up close and personal. Senior service members of the DIA have witnessed it and seen it, still to this day. It's the most elusive thing in the world to walk out and look up to the heavens and ask something to come, and all of a sudden hear these lights pop on and they come flying by you. So there's a lot of them wanting to see that and study it. And
you allow them to do that?
Yeah. I allow anybody that is... I couldn't allow just anybody because I'd be overrun with people. But at my personal house, I've had the heads of the people from NASA, people from the DIA, the DOD, the CIA, and I had 3 from Washington there last week. 3 guys, diplomats, that have experienced it with me. I was in Washington for 15 days last month, and I filmed Orbs in the daytime and at night.
Wait a second. This is where I actually am feeling a little bit of fear. He is saying just recently he was in Washington, D.C. We have been inundated with drones and orbs in the last month or so throughout New Jersey and the D.C. areas. I am completely baffled. This man's mentioning that he has an ability to reach a higher consciousness where he is visited by beings. Now he's saying he was in that location. I don't know about you, but I'm not thinking I need to see any more proof. This has just opened a black hole of curiosity that I must be sucked into, and I will be going down. I must continue to listen in. I hope you're still following along, because this is the best highlighted story I have ever heard. Are we dealing with the Watchers? What is a Watcher? Chris has me believing that this can be something far beyond a myth. This is a reality. The government does not just get involved. People do not just show up. You do not just become a man of significance. This is something that is chosen. I am personally captivated. My mind is blown, and I need to continue listening. Keep it going, Chris.
I'm out by the burning tree, and this lady from Wake Forest University, a scientist, was doing this investigation of this tree. And she has a spirit box, she called it. I'd never heard of such a thing. It makes this noise, and so supposedly spirits come through it and talk. Well, she hands it to me. I'm leaning against the tree. And my wife and my niece and her assistant were there looking at me from about 10 feet away. And suddenly this voice comes through that box and said, "Chris, the Pope's in danger. You must help." And it kept saying that, and it kept saying that. And we recorded all this. We recorded 350 audio clips, 350, and multiple voices come in this thing. And they were saying my name, call me by name. And so I sent that message to the very guy that was involved with the child from the beginning. He was my contact, right? And he's like, oh my, you need to be here tomorrow, next day. And so in a couple of days, I was at his house. And when I walked in the door, there was John Alexander. And that's when I met him. And immediately we took a tour of Philadelphia, the Congress Hall. John got me into remote viewing. I started reliving this thing, and I began to give details about this a couple of terrorists that wanted to explode a bomb on Congress Hall when the Pope was there. And they got Secret Service involved, and they intercepted emails and calls and found this kid and arrested him.
Man, this is fascinating stuff.
Yeah. So now you know.
Why do you think you are the one?
I've been asked that a million times, and I don't like to think I'm the one or any of that. I'm just a simple guy that had a miraculous experience that continues to this day. There were 3 of them went to the archives, and when they were there, they were texting me and sending me pictures of angels coming out of orbs that are painted on the wall in the Vatican, and a message from the Pope that he said, we know that they're angels and that they don't mean you no harm. But if you get too close to them, don't let them get too close, because their energy can cause damage to your body. And in fact, we know that St. Francis of Assisi had an orb get too close to him and zapped him, and he died 2 years later from his wounds. And she said, we know for sure in today's lenses it was rheumatoid arthritis, the same thing you got. And so there's a lot of, I've got all the photos and stuff of that you can see. They had a ceremony in my honor. They put my picture in the Pope's picture at the entrance of the Vatican archives. They placed my picture between the books of Galileo and Copernicus in the archives to be there forever. So there's a whole lot that's going on from every angle throughout those years there.
Had anybody ever given you insight as to whether or not there are more human beings that have had similar experiences to you?
Yeah, and they all relate them back to biblical times. As far as anybody now, I haven't heard, but there probably are. But they always use, St. Francis or these different people throughout the Bible that had these experiences with orbs. And, the reason NASA wanted to go to be a part of that, getting in the archives, they wanted to study levitating saints. How come it is a person can take off and fly to the village next door, It really happens. People levitate. So there's more to this world than we got blinders on. We're blinded. And, but we're awakening now.
This is getting deep. Wow. Now he is having premonitions and able to reach into an afterlife, maybe, where he's being told directly to himself warnings for the Pope. This is an amazing story. No wonder NASA, the CIA, and anybody who's anybody wanted to investigate this man. This is one of the most gripping stories I think I will ever hear. Let's hear what happens next in this amazing story.
So eventually, I began to remember some of what happened, not all. But what I can tell you, the 4 hours while I was gone was a virtual tour. I was inside a bubble, something that was solid that I could stand on, but I couldn't see the walls, but I could touch them. But I could see everything in every direction. And there were always 3 figures behind me that were shadowy, and they were narrating what I was seeing. And I saw North America from way up high. I saw the whole United States. And then I was taken to Egypt. And I saw the pyramids. And this Hathor's temple, I saw that. The Sphinx facing to the east. And then the lady comes back. She told me that, she said that when the star of Regulus, she called it a red star. When you look at it, it looks blue. But she said when Regulus is red on the horizon, in front of the gaze of the Sphinx, before daylight. So in other words, when it's sitting right on top of the horizon, before the sun comes up, that moment would mark a change in humanity's knowledge. And she showed me other things. War, us bombing Iran, us bombing Syria. And in them days, none of that had happened. So I put all that on this piece of paper. And now I've had so many write me back, oh my God, you see they just bombed Iran, or Iran just bombed us, you know? You were right the whole time. And I did that in 2012. And so what they did was I gave them the date of 2026 because they took that celestial event and ran it through these machines that showed that exact alignment will happen in 2026 at Easter.
What will happen?
The star will, the alignment she told me about, that the star of Regulus would be on the horizon in front of the Sphinx. At that moment, there'd be a new knowledge. Well, I had no idea if this was even possible, you know. But these astronomers run it through the machines, and it comes out that star is going to come up on the horizon in Easter of 2026. And now you hear it all over TV. 2026, that's the big date. 2027, that year, something's going to happen. Armageddon, you hear it all over, you know. You hear it on TV. If you study, like, I've heard even, well, I won't say names, but...
Please do.
Well, you know Lou Elizondo, right? Lou's mentioned that date. A lot of people have.
Easter 2026.
Well, the year 2026. I gave him the specific time. And it was with Robert Grant that I told him about this alignment and all. And then he's like, oh my God. He's been looking for this ruby, this little ruby you have to find and place it between the paws of the Sphinx to make this event that he knows is going to happen in 2026. I said, Robert, it's not a ruby, it's the star of Regulus. He looks like, he's like, oh my God, it's the king's star. What's going to happen, I don't know. But I think it's possible that's the return of
Christ.
Yeah. Or the lady and the whole heavenly host living with us, Jesus.
This is eerily similar to Jeremy Corbell's dates he just announced. They're so close in time. Corbell just announced that a craft is heading to Earth. Bledsoe just announced that a life-changing situation is going to happen to humanity. Is this all connected? What is going on here? I have so many questions. This is absolutely fascinating. I am enjoying every moment of this because it's stimulating my mind to the point where I am ignited with questions. Faith is on the forefront of my thoughts. Do I need to tap into this personally to maybe understand or to find a higher consciousness of what I'm listening to? Continue with me. This is absolutely awesome.
That's the first time I've ever said that in my life, publicly. You're the first. And 1 million people's asked me this. So I think it's entirely possible that, because she told me, She told me this. She told me that when the suffering of man becomes too great, that they're going to stop it and they're going to snuff out the darkness. That's why the military and the government all want to know about this, because they know it's real. They know this lady has been seen 1,000,000 times. And when she comes, she's always warning of some big catastrophe. I think we're living in the worst possible times right now, that if we don't make some changes, there's going to be some major disasters about to happen. And it's man-made. It's not solar flare. It's not any of that. It's a dark force. Because she told me, well, I'll tell you what she told me. This is what I put in writing, part of it. She said, there are people in power. I put this in writing in 2012. She said, there are people in power. And I'm not going to say where she focused my thoughts on that, but there's script in the book of Revelation to bring about Armageddon and the end of the world. They're doing it intentionally, and that's what she told me. And that's the very thing the main meat of the whole message I sent to these generals. So it makes sense, right?
Who is they?
I don't know who they are. I think they're Satanists. I think they're people that worship the dark force, that don't care for humanity and human life. And in fact, they're the total opposite of, they worship the devil. Or I don't know if there is a devil. I think it's a very dark force that is living full of dark entities that feed on you parasitically, like they'd be non-physical. They shape-shift. They take your mind over. They make you do crazy things. They deceive you, make you kill somebody, go crazy. Where the angelic world are the physical beings. They can come in here and light. These beings are made of light. The dark force is a parasitic race. And whoever's aligned with that is, according to the mother, the lady, is scripted in the book of Revelation. I think it's the dark force. I think that they want to snuff out God. They don't want us to have God in our heart. Why do you think they did evolution? That's the biggest, dumbest thing I ever heard in my life, that every living thing come from a mud puddle. And it can't happen. It's just not possible. It's a laugh. It's a joke.
From the very beginning, when you saw the being that your family, and initially you, if I remember correctly, thought was just the medication,
right?
You had some type of an intuition from the very get-go that this was a guardian angel of some type.
Yeah.
And it has progressed.
I knew I had one when I was 10. I just knew it. I knew something saved me, because the doctor's like, you shouldn't have lived through this. If I showed you the hole in my back and the lead in front of me right here, you'd be like, how did this happen? It's that close to my spinal column. Now I'm leaning over a bit. It's that close to the back of my head and directly in line with my heart. And I knew the doctor told me, you're the luckiest guy in the world. And all I could think then was it wasn't luck. It was something protecting me.
I'm starting to feel like faith is the catalyst to access this higher consciousness. All I know is when I watch situations like this, I am trying to wrap my head around the facts of what reality could be and what exaggeration might possibly be. I don't see 1 ounce of exaggeration. I see a man of faith, a man of character, a man with credentials, a man who has been ridiculed and ostracized from the church and the community, a man that deserves to be heard. I completely and totally believe Chris in everything he has to say. This may change my life. I think I feel for the better. Tell me what you think in the comments below. Let's continue to listen to Chris and listen with his compelling story and where it takes us.
You are the only one, to my knowledge, that I've spoken to on this subject, on the UFO subject, that believes in Jesus Christ.
I do wholeheartedly. More today than I ever did.
That openly talks about it.
Yeah. More today than I ever. And that's been a problem of censorship and kind of put me on the back burner and keeping me at bay publicly.
Yeah.
It really has.
I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised one bit.
But I'd never told this message about what we just talked about until now, because now I think it's the time to tell it. 13 years I've kept it secret. Only my family knew.
What do you think that day is going to look like? If you thought you had to...
It says in Michael, in that glorious and beautiful day, he's coming back to save us all.
Do you have any fear about that day?
I fear my children and these crazy people that just can't get a hold of their whatever they're doing. I'm almost 63 years old. I've been through 11 or 12 presidents. And people my age, and your age, but especially my age, everything's happening now is completely not normal. And we all see the writing on the wall. We all see the players, some of these players. There's a lot behind the scene that we, especially, they're hidden, but we all see something ain't right. And there's got to be a cleansing. And the only thing that can change people is God. And the phenomena can change you inside. But there ain't going to be no change of humanity without having some spiritual thing come in and change us from the inside out. And that's what's coming. And there's nothing nobody can do about it. They can squeal and squirm and try to make it look negative and ugly all they want. But it's not going to stop what's coming. And in the book of Revelation, in the very last chapter, it says, when the armies surround Israel on all four sides, that he's coming back to fight the battle and rid the world of evil. And then there'll be a time of peace, 1,000 years. And that's what the lady told me. Same thing. I said a lot.
Thank you for sharing that.
A whole lot. 18 years I've never told this. Or the 17 and a half years.
How does it feel to get it out?
Right. Right. I'll get a lot of blowback from this, I promise you. I just hope the world that has been told it's the devil can wake the heck up and see that a little bit of heaven's coming here to help us.
Seeing or witnessing an angel is something that some of us only hear in storybooks. Something we only see on movies. Something that people make up in stories. Chris encounters them constantly. Now, how they expose themselves as an orb or whatever it may be, what I'm gathering, these watchers are angels. Messengers from a higher being, from what I feel. This is just possibly the beginning of what's to come. I'm starting to feel like Chris knows something that we all wish we did. Something we're overlooking. Something that we should not overlook. Tell me in the comments below. I'd like to know your opinion. We all would. But for now, let's continue to hear what Chris has to say.
You know, there's been a lot of speculation on if UFOs are strictly some type of spiritual entity, or if they are nuts and bolts, or if it's both.
There's a possibility there's both, but I haven't seen the other side. All these years' experience has been with the phenomenon, I call it, is a spiritual thing. It's like magic. They appear out of nowhere. In fact, Tim Burchett made a quote, and I saved it, that they believe that the interdimensional world would be the angels. And so if there might be some star cruiser coming from some planet some far away and stopping over to resupply and get some gas or something, right? But I can tell you there's not a reason in this world an alien would come down to the river where I'm crying out, God help me. Why would he even care? Why would they want to help me? Why would they help all these other people, even animals? Because they have compassion for us and love.
Why you? What is it that you believe that God saw in you in that moment of time? Lots of people look up.
I think that the phenomenon or God or whoever knew that I'm the kind of person that would never back down. Never, ever. Look at Paul in the Bible. Look at all the apostles, every one of them. They knew what they knew, and they went to death for it. They were boiled in oil and tortured and crucified and hung upside down and dismembered because they knew, without a doubt. Paul, on the road to Damascus, it says, and a flash of light flashed around him and blinded him. It was an orb, the ball of light. And that's exactly what comes out of the sky and interacts or comes into my house or around us. It's just the light. And it answers to prayer. In fact, I believe everybody has guardian angels, probably at least 2. And I've been quoted saying there's 15 around me at all times. My kids are like, how do you know that, Dad? Because I constantly see there's about 15 of them that'll appear, and sometimes they do it all at once. So I think you have them. All you got to do is acknowledge it.
This is giving me chills. I'm not familiar with the book of Revelations or the end of the world. But when I hear that Jerusalem being surrounded, which is the end when he'll come back to defend us, to change humanity's outlook on evil and honesty, wow. Mind blown. Just wow. I think to myself, the Ark of the Covenant must be in Jerusalem. And I think religious leaders know it. I think that's why there's constantly battles there. We know it's over religion. But is it something even deeper? This is a complete moment of faith. That's all this is. Chris is being so honest. He doesn't know if there's aliens. This moment is only showing Chris Bledsoe's true character. This man has just been 100% honest with us. He told us things that may change your life for the better, or may make you question what reality really is. He mentioned some dates that completely and totally are too far coincidental to deny or to be overlooked. When he mentioned the eggs, just like our recent friend Jacob Barber, And when Chris spoke of the Orbs recently with his visit to the DC area, which we recently ourselves, the media has been inundated with sightings over that area. Far too coincidental. I personally believe we just witnessed something that we should never forget, something we should learn from, something that we should be willing to tell and explain to others. Chris Bledsoe's story changed me for the better. Tell me what you think in the comments below. Every one of us would love to hear your opinion. I personally am in a better mood after hearing this. Thank you, Chris. This was absolutely amazing. And I will continue to search and speculate and search down rabbit holes for the truth. And I will find the truth. I'm your boy Bear Jags. Thanks for following along with my journey. Remember to like and subscribe for more exciting content just like this. And until the next one, God out.